Okay, so we're covering ion count. Basically, all you're doing is just counting the number of ions. Why do we do that? It's because it affects your boiling points and your freezing points. The more ions you have, the more it affects the boiling points and the freezing points. So, let's say I have, let's see, some of them have 1 ion. I'll have to go through that. And some of them have 7 ions. So if I'm looking at my range, and again, I'm kind of covering a little bit of something called colligative properties. This would be your normal boiling point for water. This will be your normal freezing point for water. Now, you need to remember this part here, you're never going to have if we're talking about freezing and boiling. Okay? That's the normal ones. So if I have 1 ion, it's still going to raise that little bit. So that would be 1 ion. Then this one will lower it by that much, and it's still the same thing. It'd be 1 ion. So we refer to those as boiling point elevations and freezing point depressions. Okay? Now, what happens when I have 7? Well, let's go over to the other side. What is it going to do to the boiling point? 7 ions will increase it by quite a bit. And then, if we're looking at our freezing point, it would go down this way. So the more ions, the more it raises your boiling point and also lowers your freezing points. Boiling point elevation, freezing point depression. And you can calculate it. It's based on some other factors. There's a PDF already in Schoology about it. So it'll show you even how to calculate. It's just popping in numbers. The only thing is, if you don't count the ions right, it's going to throw your answer off. Okay? And it'll be quite a bit. Any questions on this part? Okay. Now the next question is, how do you count ions? You're going to look at 2 separate parts. You're going to be doing your positive ions and your negative ions. It is actually quite easy. So let's say I have something like CaCl2. Well, I have 2 separate ions. This is my positive, this is my negative. So how many total ions do I have? I have 1 calcium, that's 1 positive ion. So this would be 1, plus I have 2 negative ions over here. How many total ions do I have? 3. Okay? There is an exception part. I told you about the 1 ion. I'm going to show you how that works. But again, we're kind of dealing with this right now. What if I do NaCl? Well, I got a positive, I got a negative. That's just 1 of each, right? So 1 plus 1 is 2. Now, which one would be the most effective, let's say, if I want to de-ice roads? It would be the one with the more ions in it. Okay? Now, there's kind of a little reason for that, but basically what it does is maybe this one will freeze at a negative 2 degrees Celsius. When I add this one, it'll freeze at a lower temperature, which means if it doesn't get down to that temperature, it will not freeze. So this is how you would do your ion counts for those. Now, we also have those ones with the parentheses, right? Again, you have to remember there is two separate ions. So when I'm adding them up, I'm only going to add two separate numbers. Okay? So let's say I have something that looks like this. So you see 2047. Now if you take a look at this, I am not counting all the elements in it. I'm only going to count the ions. Most effective way to look at the number of ions is what's outside the parentheses. Okay? So I've got 7, we'll call those oxalate ions. It is a -2 charge, but I'm not going to count that. I'm counting the number of these guys here. Those are my negative ions. I've got 7 total here. How many positive ions do I have? I got 2 manganese ions, right? So that's 2. Again, adding up 2 separate numbers. Be careful with that. So this one would be 9. Those are my total ions. Again, we just add 2 of them. Okay?
How do you get that idea?
Just from the formula here. I've got, think of this, I think if you remember balancing, we think of this as one thing, but I have 7 of them.
So you just want alpha numbers?
Yep. On this one, add up only 2 numbers. So I'm not going to be adding up 3, adding up only 2 numbers. Okay? We're not doing total atoms. That doesn't work. Questions? There are some that may be a little tricky, but actually they're not. Again, you have to keep in the back of the mind, I only have 2 ions here. So I'm only going to add 2 numbers. Then we must assume that that is canceling out the other one. So this is going to be 1 chromium ion, positive, plus 1 sulfate ion, which is another 1. This is 2. If they cancel out, it's going to be 1 plus 1 is 2. Okay? Got to be careful with it. Any questions on that? It's not too bad. Now, we did say that there was 1 ion, right? So we just went through the ionic ones. We have those covalent ones too, right? How about this one? We do not have 3 ions here. If it's covalent, again, that indicates covalent, we only have 1 ion for this. So you have to be on the lookout as far as covalent ones. They only have 1 ion. Okay? We also have acids, right? Right? I hope so. Again, we have 2 total ions. We know that hydrogen has a positive 1 charge. We have 2 hydrogen ions, plus this remaining part, no parentheses, I have 1 sulfate ion. What is my total? 3. Any questions on that? We don't count that as covalent, by the way. It's got ions. Let's see. Again, if I'm looking at that, covalent, 1. Covalent, 1. So just don't get caught up on looking at the numbers, because some of them, they don't show the number of ions. Does that make sense? covalent doesn't mix in water. One's polar and the other one's not polar. Okay, so we're done with that part. We're gonna do the ones with the worksheet.